So I've been working on tackling Europa Universalis, and it's been a fairly interesting process so far. Started out doing some of the shorter battle scenarios just to learn the combat sequence, which I've learned is very much like the Empires in Arms combat sequence, which I always found was convoluted and difficult to understand, mainly because of the charts. I always found the charts kind of baffling and difficult to get through. This game, fortunately, doesn't have such a weird combat chart as Empires in Arms, but they use the same sort of percentage loss determination process as Empires in Arms does, which is manageable, although I typically don't like games where you have to get out a calculator to calculate percentages during combat. Seems like there could be an easier way where you can just use a more typical CRT. Anyway, I played through the shorter battle scenarios and had a fairly easy time grasping it. The rules for most AWE games are usually problematic, partly because they're translated from French, and sometimes the translation isn't always perfect, and on top of that, the organization of the rules makes things difficult to find, and sometimes, and I don't know that this is a translation issue, the original rules in French may have been written this way, but a lot of times there's ambiguities or things that can pop up in the game that aren't addressed in the rules that leave things open to interpretation, or stuff is just is difficult to comprehend by omission. That's been some work getting through the rules. I found though that as I read through them, the concepts in the rules were not particularly difficult to grasp. There's just a question of whether everything that you need for all the potential situations that can arise in a game this big and sprawling will be there. And the amount of discussion online on there's a Yahoo groups dedicated to EU. The discussion online and the number of times the rules have been rewritten and reorganized by third parties would suggest that there's plenty of stuff, plenty of issues to be had as the game plays, especially when you're dealing with the extensive political event rules, which a single political event during a game turn can throw all kinds of special rules and exceptions into the mix. So that's one of the reasons why there's been an extensive rewrite of those political events by a guy named Risto Majorum or something. I can't remember his last name. I think he's Italian. But he rewrote the political events to the game, which were originally in the Annexes book here, which included not only the political events, but the economic events, and minor country setup stuff. All that kind of stuff is in the Annexes book. Minor country setup, info, and economic events are the same, but the political events have been completely rewritten. And Risto makes these available. I think they're on the BGG website, but also in the EU Group's website. He does alter some of the game's rules to accommodate the political events, so that's all made available. But otherwise, yeah, there's considerable text involved in all of these rewrites. So I am using the rewrites, though, because apparently they fix a lot of the issues and ambiguities and unclear and missing stuff from the original game's political events. I also found, and this was also in the Yahoo groups for EU, a rewritten version of the rules that reorganizes them according to the sequence of play. The rules, as currently written in the manual that came with the game, were in kind of a disorganized fashion. They didn't follow the sequence of play, so it was not a natural progression of concepts and rules in the rulebook itself. So, which comes in at a hefty 72 pages. So, this rewrite eliminated a lot of the translation issues that may have existed, and I don't know that there were a ton, but there were enough that you'd get some awkward phrasing and things like that in the rules. That sort of stuff's been cleaned up. The redundancies have been cleaned up, and again, it's been totally reorganized to follow the sequence of play, which has been very helpful as I've gone through the sequence of play, which is pretty clear on the player aids, and as you can see, pretty long. But going through it on the player aid and then just following along in the rules has been pretty helpful in figuring stuff out. So this video, and possibly a series of videos, are going to focus not on the gameplay, but on issues that I've run into in the rules, and what I did to potentially resolve those issues, and then people can comment whether I did it correctly or not. So far, the biggest issue I've had has not been comprehending the rules themselves, but actually figuring out all of these charts on the player aids. And these player aids are organized or created specifically for countries because things like their purchases and maintenance costs, turn limits by period, and period limits are all going to be specific to a particular country. So France's player aid is going to have France's numbers on here, and these are not going to be the same as what you'd find on Spain or Turkey or England or any of the other player aids. It's all dictated by country. And the first issue that I ran into was deciphering the purchases and maintenance chart, because you can see here your maximum size counter purchase. Counters are split into detachments, Army minus, Army plus, or naval detachments, fleet minus, fleet plus. The first thing I had to figure out was, well, what are the force configurations of an A minus counter versus an A plus counter? I know from the rules say an A minus counter is going to be half the size of an A plus counter. It'll have half the strength points in it. And so this didn't tell me anywhere on here, and it would say, for the army size for your country, see your player aid. And so I looked at this and I thought, well, I don't see it on here. So initially I thought, oh, maybe, well, it says 1 land detachment for France in this instance has 8 infantry and 2 cav, and 1 naval detachment is 5 naval points. And I thought, oh, so the rules give me an equivalency chart that says 4 detachments equals 1 army minus plus 2 detachments equals 1 army plus. So it must be, 4 times the land detachment amount must be what's in an army plus. But wait, that doesn't say anything about artillery. And artillery is an option for purchase. How do I know how much artillery is in a Army Plus? And so I looked around, I thought, well, maybe there's another chart, maybe it says it somewhere in the rules, maybe it says it under the country-specific rules. I didn't see it on turn limits, I glanced at period limits, not seeing it, maybe it's somewhere else in here. But all this was, it's reinforcements, it's pirates and privateers, conquistadors. This is all the combat charts over here. On the back page, it's all, income-related stuff, colonies, investments. I thought, what the hell is this? And so, for the longest time, could not figure it out until I was like, well, I'm just going to start playing with my current interpretation and see what happens. And it was during the income phase when I was looking, finally reading the period limits chart about what the limits were for some of the economic stuff, like the DTI, your domestic trade income or foreign trade income, manufacturers and colony trading posts, things like that, that I came across, oh wait, warships limit, maximum size, Army plus, fleet plus. Finally, under a chart that I didn't initially anticipate was where military information or restrictions would be, there it was. So right in front of me the whole time. But when you have this level of charts, you've got 4 pages of just dense, tiny texted packed with info, charts. Sometimes the obvious will just skip right by you. So, they put it under the period limits table because this breaks is a chart that breaks down by period. You can see there on the left. And the maximum size of your armies and fleets changes by period. So, whoever put these charts together said, well, if you want to know what the maximum is, you're going to want it broken down by period. Your force composition for an army plus or fleet plus counter, you're going to want to know what that is because it's going to be a maximum and it's going to be broken down by period. So there it is on the period chart, not on the purchases and maintenance chart. So that mystery was finally solved. An A-plus counter for France consists of 17 infantry, 11 cav, and 2 artillery, where fleet plus is 20 naval points and 5 transports. And then, according to the rules, your army minus is exactly half. So you take each of those numbers and halve it, and I think you round it down. So you divide 17 by 2, 11 by 2, and 2 by 2 to get your army minus size. And then your detachment size, again, already pointed out here. If you get a land detachment for France, it's going to have 8 infantry and 2 cav. So that was the first mystery solved. One of the things that I had some of the most trouble with in terms of figuring it out. Working my way through the income table the first time, I thought, well, look how long this thing is. Ugh, it's going to be daunting. It actually does a pretty good job of explaining itself and where you need to total up your boxes. It'll tell you, for land income, total up boxes 8, 9, 10, and 11. It's kind of like doing your taxes. This in itself did not give me a lot of problems. And the nice thing was that in these rewritten rules, let's see if I can flip right to, there's the administrative section here. Back to the income section, it actually just walks you right through filling out your, go through the price change and price adjustment stuff, which is, all of your various resources here will adjust in terms of production and then adjust in terms of price related to inflation and so forth. So it takes you through that, but then literally calculation of gross income, it'll literally take you through box by box and tell you here's what you need to put in each of these boxes. Here's charts that you may need to use to when you're determining your DTI. And FTI tells you the calculations that you need to do by box to figure that stuff out. So very helpful in my opinion. And it made it much easier just to walk through this step by step. So, eventually, once I get a few more turns under my belt, hopefully that kind of thing will start to become second nature. So the income stuff has not presented too many problems. When I actually started getting ready to move units, I ran into the next potential issue, which is, okay, so I've got Spain here with a conquistador and a naval explorer, Columbus in this case. So how do I do discovery? Spain had discovered the Sea of Canarias, there are Canaries, which is where the Canary Islands are, and the Sea of Azores, which is up there near the Azores. But they didn't have anything beyond that, so they had to go through the Central Atlantic and quote-unquote discover it. Same with the Bermuda Triangle, over to the Sea of Cuba and to Cuba itself. So how do we do that? When I read the rules, and this would be in the military phase, it started talking about attrition and naval movement and so forth, but nothing about discovery. To get to the discovery portion of the game, you have to flip way back to the back of the rules, just before the special rules, I believe, is the rest of the world section. And here is where we talk about discovery. So initially, it was confusing because whenever it says whenever a country enters unknown territory, it must stop its movement for the round and make a test of discovery. But it seems to make an exception down here for conquistadors or explorers. They may explore several provinces or sea zones in the same round, ending movement in the last province they wish to make a discovery attempt upon. And then tells you how to, to discover a province, you have to make it successful. Obtain a success result on the discovery table, D10, then you modify it as follows. So +1 for each sea zone or province explored beyond the first by a stack in one military round, which would seem to be here that explorers or conquistadors only could do this. If you're following up here, it says where they have to stop every time. I suspect that means if you just have military units, yeah, as it says here, military unit explores without a leader, only one province or sea may be explored per round. So you go down here. So in this case, if Columbus is exploring, in this case, 3 ocean segments, or 3 ocean sections, it's going to be +1 for this one, the first one after the first, and +2 then because he explored 2 zones after the first zone that he explored. So that's a +3 modifier. You can see you can add for poor weather, not a factor here. Then special risk modifier if there's a little blue circle in the sea zones, which there weren't in those Caribbean sea zones. And then minus the maneuver value of the ranking explorer at sea or conquistador on land, or half the maneuver value of a ranking explorer in a coastal province. So in this case, the Columbus had a maneuver value of 6, so you subtract 6 from that for a net of -3. So now, and then important to notice here, when countries attempt to make discoveries, there's no additional attrition roll for movement, regardless of how many known provinces, sea zones the stack moved through. This is really beneficial for explorers and conquistadors because, assuming I'm interpreting this correctly, because if you see here, those little storm cloud icons on the sea zones, and the Central Atlantic is a 6, Bermuda Triangle is a 7, I think the Sea of Cuba there is a 6. You'd have to roll on the 6 table for your attrition every province that you enter. So, that ordinarily would be 3 attrition rolls for the moving fleet. In this case, though, because I'm exploring those zones, I ignore those, apparently, and just go to the attrition, or the discovery table. And as you see, there's a little percentage there next to each sea and land result you get. That's going to be the total attrition you'll take for all your movement. So, some of those, you can see the lower success numbers have fairly mild attrition, although potentially as high as 30%. Whereas if you fail and roll really high, you're losing almost your whole fleet. So, so the attrition can be bad if you fail your roll. So, hence you want somebody like Columbus with a 6 maneuverability, because he's going to be taking 6 off of his discovery table rolls every time, which greatly increases his chances of success. So, I thought initially we were kind of confused by how this would work, but again, just walking through these rules as I resolve things seemed to make it work pretty well. And then, if you have success, which I did on my roll for Columbus, then you can see all the provinces, sea zones explored by these units are discovered. So it's one roll for the whole show. So you want to try and move as much as you can with your explorers and explore as much as you can, in the hopes that, especially if you've got a good explorer, that you can explore as much as possible, and hopefully the attritional damage will be as little as possible. So otherwise you have to literally go back to a friendly port or whatever and kind of start over, in addition to taking whatever bad attrition you'd get from failing. So here, and then one of the things you have to do is report the discovery. So in this case I brought a couple of fleet detachments with me, so what I can do is just send one of them back to the home country, and they will report the discovery, and then I can mark. And here I did do, and I'm not sure if I did this correctly, because I had 2 stacks here. I had one stack with Columbus with 2 fleet detachments, and then another fleet detachment in its own stack with the Conquistador. And so I moved Columbus through to discover all the sea zones, and then moved the Conquistador stack through and had him get off at Cuba. The question here is, and I ended up rolling for attrition in the sea zones that I moved the Conquistador through, because Columbus had already moved through those zones and discovered them. So because the Conquistador was not moving through his fleet detachment was not moving through new discovered zones, he would have to do the attrition roll for each zone as he entered it. Except then when he disembarked onto Cuba, he would make one discovery roll to see if he successfully discovers Cuba. Not entirely sure that I did that right, but since each stack completes its movement before the next stack moves, I assumed my movement was correct there, and that I couldn't use the Conquistador to make the one attrition roll at the end for discovery, because he was going through zones that were already discovered. So that's something that someone may want to comment on if I'm doing that incorrectly.